for Dunkley. I'll give the call to the member for Dunkley.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I've been thinking a lot lately about wellbeing, and many people know that the concept of Australia adopting something that looks like a wellbeing budget, or as the Treasurer is talking about in the consultation he has open at the moment, measuring what matters, is something that I've been interested in and talking about for a number of years now. But it's clear that wellbeing is a concept that's ill-defined in some ways in debate. It's a little bit like resilience, which is something I've also been thinking a lot about. We often use these words with an assumption that everyone who's listening to us thinks about them in the same way, or that it means the same thing to everyone. But it can mean a whole raft of things, wellbeing, depending on what's happening in a person's life or in their community or in their country. You know, wellbeing can mean physical health. It can literally mean whether or not you have an illness or a disease, an acute or chronic condition. It can mean whether you're fit, whether you have a good diet, whether you smoke or drink to excess. Wellbeing can mean how your emotional and mental state is faring, whether you're lonely and disconnected, whether you're positive and happy. Wellbeing, many people have contended, and I'm one of them, can mean how your community is faring. Is your community connected and happy? Are there enough jobs? Can people get the sort of work that they want, which have good conditions and are well paid? Can small businesses thrive and compete with the conglomerates? What's your local economy like? Wellbeing is whether you can walk in the park and breathe in clean air, whether you have a park, whether your native flora and fauna is thriving or dying, whether the oceans are swimmable and the mountains are still there to climb and the ice is still there if we want to visit the poles of our globe. Wellbeing can mean that the economy of a country is thriving, because that's essential to deliver not just economic wellbeing, but houses that people can live in and water that people can drink and those well-paid jobs and industries. Wellbeing, I think, means all of those things. And they are all connected and indivisible. And I don't think in this Parliament, perhaps, and I mean this place, not just the current Parliament with the members in it, that we always think deeply enough or have the time and the space to think deeply enough about what wellbeing is and whether we're here to try to help deliver it, and if we are, how we would go about that. It's one of the reasons I know that the Treasurer has said a budget or a process that counts what matters and reports on what matters is something that he is working towards implementing in this Parliament and for our country. Recently I was talking, as I do, about metastatic breast cancer, and the Breast Cancer Network put out a report at the end of last year which to emphasise that whilst we have national registers, for example, that note when a person is diagnosed with cancer and when they die of cancer, we don't record on registers when people are diagnosed with metastatic cancer, particularly metastatic breast cancer. So there's no sort of national record of how many people in this country have metastatic breast cancer, although some modelling would suggest it's currently about 10,500 people. And the phrase that comes from some of that I've been thinking about is, if you aren't counted, you don't count. Because it's very hard to know whether we have enough resources directed towards support for the people and the families who have metastatic cancer are adequate, are doing what they should be doing. If we're not counting how many people have metastatic breast cancer and using the data to see what's happening. And I think that's the concept that goes back to wellbeing. Obviously, how well and how long you can live with a chronic condition like metastatic breast cancer is part of wellbeing, but counting what matters and amplifying what matters is how we will get better at delivering wellbeing. And I've used this quote a number of times in this parliament and things that I've written, but I've yet to find anything, I think, that encapsulates what I'm trying to talk about better. It's from a 1968 speech by US Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and he's talking about approach to measuring success of a country. And he says, and I quote, "The gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile." So that's why I come back often in my meandering thoughts, a little bit like my meandering speech today, to why we should be not only measuring gross domestic product, which is essential and important, why we should not only be talking about the economy growing in Australia, we should be talking about things like the economy growing in a sustainable and equitable manner, about it delivering for everyone, including, or in particular, those who are worse off, and why we should be talking about economic growth being a vehicle for us to support everything that makes life worthwhile. So innovative, inclusive and resilient Australia should be a bipartisan objective, and I think it is. But I come back to where I started. It might depend on how you define those words when you use them. You know, resilience is used at the moment for everything from a quarantine facility in the Northern Territory to helping children who are struggling with the return to school after years of COVID and shutdowns. And we talk about it a lot in the context of a climate change debate. We talk about it a lot in the context of people who have suffered serious health conditions and are able to, or at least look able to, get on with life. We talk about it in terms of businesses and whether they can survive. But what does resilience really mean, and how is it connected to wellbeing? You know, does resilience mean we accept more floods, more bushfires, more extreme weather events, but we build better infrastructure that can resist it, is resilient to it? Or does it mean that we build an approach where our economy is resilient to needing to use non-renewable energy to be able to get by, and we're resilient because we are fighting the impacts of climate change? I don't have any answers to all of those things, but I think it's a conversation worth having more broadly.
And I thank the member for Dunkley